What happens when humanity's greatest weakness becomes their ultimate strength? When every other species in the galaxy sees broken things and walks away, humans see potential. They see puzzles to solve, mysteries to unravel, and lives to save. This is the story of the salvage crew that picked up what everyone else considered worthless scrap, only to discover that sometimes the most damaged things hold the greatest secrets. Sometimes what appears dead is simply waiting for someone who refuses to give up. And sometimes the universe's most ancient guardian chooses the most unlikely protectors to carry on a legacy that spans millennia. The Terran Salvage Union classified it as a Class D derelict. The Galactic Maritime Authority marked it as total loss salvage rights open. Even the scrap merchants of Kepler Station turned their noses up at it. But Captain Maria Santos and her crew of the salvage vessel Persistence saw something different. They saw a challenge. They saw a story waiting to be told. They saw hope floating in the endless darkness of space. What they found would change not just their lives, but the entire galaxy's understanding of consciousness, sacrifice, and what it truly means to be alive. The salvage vessel Persistence drifted through the asteroid field like a scavenger picking through bones. Captain Maria Santos stood on the bridge, her weathered hands wrapped around a steaming cup of synthetic coffee, watching the scanner display with the patience that 20 years of salvage work had taught her. The green dots on the screen represented potential fortune or another dead end, and experience had taught her that the latter was far more common. Contact bearing 27 Mark 8, called out Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison from the sensor station. His voice carried the particular tone of someone who had learned not to get excited about every blip on the screen to send a gift. With Trust Teddy, metallic signature, approximately 800 meters in length, configuration unknown. Maria moved to his station, her magnetic boots clicking against the deck plating with each step. The ship's artificial gravity generator had been acting up again, cycling between 80 and 90% Earth normal every few hours. Another repair bill they couldn't afford, but then again that was nothing new for an independent salvage operation. Unknown configuration? She asked, peering over Jake's shoulder at the detailed sensor readout. That's unusual. After 2 decades out here, I thought we'd seen every class of ship that ever flew. Jake manipulated the controls trying to get a clearer picture. It's definitely artificial, Captain, too symmetrical to be natural, and the metal composition is consistent with Starship construction. But the design doesn't match anything in our database. Not human, not Altarian, not even close to vegan architecture. The third member of their crew, Dr. Elena Vasquez, looked up from her workstation where she had been cataloging their last haul. As the team xenoarchaeologist and tech specialist, she was responsible for identifying and evaluating anything they recovered. "How far out of known shipping lanes are we?" she asked. "About 47 light-years from the nearest registered trade route," Maria replied. "This sector was marked as clear by the survey teams 50 years ago. Nothing but rocks and empty space, supposedly." Elena saved her work and moved to join them at the sensor station. If it's been drifting out here for 50 years or more, that would explain why it's not in our databases. Could be a pre-contact design, maybe even pre-FTL. Pre-contact artifacts were rare and valuable, especially if they were in decent condition. The Galactic Archaeological Consortium paid premium prices for anything that helped fill in the gaps of known history. "Jake, can you get us a visual?" "Switching to optical scanning now." Jake's fingers danced across his console, and the main screen flickered from the tactical display to a direct camera feed. What they saw made all 3 of them fall silent. The ship was massive, easily 3 times the length of the Persistence, but it looked like it had been through hell. The hull was scarred and pitted with massive gouges that suggested both weapon damage and decades of micrometeorite impacts. Entire sections had been blown away, leaving twisted metal frameworks exposed to space like broken ribs. What had once been smooth, flowing lines were now jagged edges and crater-marked surfaces. But despite the extensive damage, there was something hauntingly beautiful about the vessel's design. Even in its broken state, They could see that it had been built with an aesthetic sense that prioritized grace over mere function. The hull curved in ways that suggested organic growth rather than mechanical construction, and even the damaged areas seemed to follow some kind of artistic pattern. "My God," Elena whispered. "Look at the construction techniques. Those aren't welded joints. The hull sections appear to be grown rather than assembled. And that metal alloy. I've never seen anything like it." Maria studied the image more carefully. Any signs of life? Power signatures? Anything that suggests it's more than just a floating tomb? Jake ran a full-spectrum analysis, his instruments probing the derelict with every sensor the Persistence possessed. Nothing on the life signs. No energy emissions, no heat signatures, beyond what you'd expect from passive solar absorption. "But Captain, there's something odd about the internal structure." "Odd how?" "The density readings don't match what I'd expect from a ship that size. It's like there are enormous hollow spaces inside, chambers that are far too large to be practical for any kind of spacecraft design. And the gravitational field is all wrong. It's generating a measurable distortion in local space-time, but there's no indication of what could be causing it." Elena's eyes lit up with the kind of scientific curiosity that had drawn her to xenoarchaeology in the first place. That gravitational anomaly could indicate exotic matter construction or some kind of artificial singularity containment system. Either way, we're looking at technology that's centuries ahead of current human capabilities. Maria weighed their options. The smart play would be to register their find with the Galactic Salvage Authority and wait for a proper archaeological team with better equipment. That was the safe legal approach that would guarantee them a modest finder's fee. But safe and legal didn't pay for ship repairs, crew salaries, or the mounting debts that had been accumulating since their last big score 6 months ago. "What's our fuel situation?" she asked. "Enough to get home with a small margin for error," Jake replied. "But if we're thinking about bringing that monster back with us, we'd need to strip our emergency reserves. And the towing capacity? She's big, but most of her mass seems to be missing. With the Persistence's tractor beam array, we could probably manage it." Slowly, Elena was already pulling up star charts on her personal tablet. The nearest port with heavy salvage facilities is Kepler Station. It's a 4-day journey at maximum tow speed, assuming we don't run into any complications. Maria stared at the image of the derelict ship, her instincts warring with her practical nature. Every salvage captain had heard stories of crews who had taken on jobs beyond their capabilities and never made it home. But they had also heard stories of crews who had made discoveries that set them up for life. "Jake, run a full diagnostic on our tractor beam emitters," she decided. "Do you need 1012? Elena, I want you to prepare a preliminary examination protocol. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right." The approach took 3 hours, with Maria personally piloting the Persistence through the asteroid field toward their prize. Up close, the damage to the alien vessel was even more spectacular. Entire decks had been opened to space, and through the breaches they could see corridors and chambers that seemed to stretch impossibly far into the ship's interior. "Bringing us to within 200 meters, Maria announced as she fired the maneuvering thrusters to match the derelict's rotation. "Jake, deploy the tractor beam." The Persistence shuddered slightly as the beam locked onto the alien ship's hull. Immediately, Jake's console lit up with warnings and system alerts. "Captain, I'm getting some unusual readings. The tractor beam is holding, but there's some kind of feedback coming from the target. It's almost like—" He paused, checking his instruments again. "It's almost like something inside that ship is responding to our beam." "That's impossible. My readings show no active power systems whatsoever. Then why is my equipment telling me otherwise?" Jake adjusted several controls, trying to stabilize the connection. "The feedback isn't random. There's a pattern to it. Almost like a heartbeat." Maria felt a chill run down her spine, but she pushed the feeling aside. 20 years of salvage work had taught her that space played tricks on people's minds. especially when they were dealing with the unknown. Probably just resonance effects from the tractor beam interacting with the hull structure. Jake, can you maintain a stable connection for the trip back to Kepler? Should be able to, Captain, but I recommend we keep the power levels as low as possible. Whatever's causing this feedback, I don't want to overload any systems. As they began the slow journey back toward civilized space, Elena suited up for an EVA inspection of their prize. The Persistence had a small shuttle bay that could accommodate basic maintenance work, but for anything more complex, they had to go outside. Be careful out there, Maria warned as Elena prepared to cycle through the airlock. That ship has been drifting in space for decades. Even if it looks stable, there could be structural weaknesses that aren't obvious. Elena's voice crackled through the comm system as she maneuvered her suit toward the derelict. Copy that, Captain. Beginning exterior examination now. For the next 2 hours, Elena methodically documented the alien vessel's condition, taking thousands of photographs and sensor readings from every angle. The more she saw, the more questions arose. The weapon damage is extensive, she reported, but it's not random. Whatever attacked this ship knew exactly where to hit for maximum effect. The breaches are precisely placed to cripple specific systems: propulsion, communications, life support. This wasn't a battle, it was an execution. She moved closer to one of the larger breaches, playing her suit lights into the dark interior. I can see at least 7 levels inside, maybe more. The interior architecture is unlike anything in our databases. The corridors are too wide for human use, but they don't match any known alien species either. Any signs of bodies? Crew remains? Maria asked. Negative. Whatever happened to the crew, they either escaped or were removed. But Captain, you need to see this. Elena had maneuvered to what appeared to be the ship's main engineering section, where the hull damage provided a clear view inside. I'm sending video feed now. The image that appeared on the Persistence's main screen defied easy description. The interior of the alien ship was filled with crystalline structures that grew like metallic trees from the deck and bulkheads. The formations were beautiful and complex, creating fractal patterns that seemed to shift and change as Elena's lights played across them. Are those natural formations? Jake asked. Some kind of crystallization from exposure to space? Elena maneuvered closer, her suit's short-range sensors gathering detailed information. I don't think so. The crystal structure is too uniform, too organized. It's almost like these formations are part of the ship's original design. But if that's true, then this vessel was built using principles we don't understand at all. As she spoke, something caught her attention. A faint reflection deep within the crystalline maze. She adjusted her position to get a better view, and what she saw made her breath catch in her throat. Captain, she said quietly, I think we need to get inside this ship. Elena, we've discussed this. A full interior exploration is beyond our current capabilities. We don't have the equipment or the personnel. There's something moving in there. The silence that followed her words seemed to stretch for eternity. Finally, Maria's voice came through, the calm, carefully controlled but tense. Define moving. Light patterns deep inside the crystal formations. They're subtle, but they're definitely there. Pulsing in a regular rhythm, like neural activity or like breathing. Jake's instruments had been monitoring Elena's suit telemetry throughout her EVA, and now he was seeing the same anomalous readings he had detected during their approach. Captain, I'm picking up that same feedback pattern again. It's stronger now, and it's definitely coming from inside the alien ship. Maria stared at the image on the screen, watching for any sign of the lights Elena had described. Part of her wanted to order their archaeologist back to the ship immediately, to play it safe and stick to their original plan. But another part of her, the part that had driven her to become a salvage captain in the first place, knew that they were on the verge of something extraordinary. Elena, return to the ship, she decided. We'll discuss this properly once you're back inside. But as Elena began to maneuver away from the derelict, the feedback pattern that Jake had been monitoring suddenly intensified. The lights she had glimpsed deep within the crystalline structures began to pulse more rapidly, and for just a moment, the entire alien vessel seemed to shimmer with an internal luminescence that had nothing to do with reflected starlight. Then, as quickly as it had begun, the derelict returned to its previous state of apparent lifelessness, leaving the crew of the Persistence to wonder if they had witnessed something real or merely imagined it. As Elena sealed the airlock behind her and began removing her EVA suit, Maria realized that their simple salvage operation had become something far more complex. They were no longer just hauling scrap metal back to port. They were transporting a mystery that might be beyond their ability to solve, and deep in her gut, she had the unsettling feeling that the mystery was aware of them too. The journey to Kepler Station should have taken 4 days. They were now 6 hours into day 3, and everything that could go wrong had decided to present itself as a personal challenge. The Persistence environmental systems had developed a persistent recycling fault that filled the air with the subtle but unmistakable scent of ozone and burnt electronics. The artificial gravity generator had finally given up entirely, leaving the crew to navigate their ship in 0G while towing a massive derelict that seemed determined to make their lives as difficult as possible. But none of these mechanical failures compared to the growing certainty that their salvaged prize was not as dead as they had originally believed. Captain Maria Santos floated in the ship's small conference room, which doubled as their dining area and recreation space when they weren't hauling cargo. Elena and Jake had secured themselves to chairs around the central table, and the collection of data tablets, printouts, and sensor logs spread between them told a story that none of them particularly wanted to believe. "Show me the pattern again," Maria said, her voice carrying the particular weariness that came from too little sleep and too many impossible problems. Jake activated his tablet, and a complex waveform appeared on the room's main display screen. The pattern was subtle but undeniably present, a rhythmic pulse that had been detected in electromagnetic emissions, gravitational fluctuations, and even minute variations in the derelict's internal temperature. "It started about 18 hours after we locked onto the target with our tractor beam," Jake explained. "At first I thought it was just resonance effects from the towing operation, but the pattern is too complex for that. Look at this section here." He highlighted a portion of the waveform. "The frequency modulation follows mathematical progressions that don't occur naturally. Someone, or something, is generating this signal." Elena manipulated her own tablet, pulling up a 3-dimensional model of the alien ship's interior based on her EVA observations and the Persistence's deep scan sensors. The signal appears to be originating from the central core of the vessel, approximately here. She highlighted a section deep within the ship's superstructure. "That's where the crystalline formations are most dense, and it's also the location where I observed the light phenomena." Maria studied the display, her practical mind warring with the implications of what they were discussing. "Some kind of emergency beacon or distress signal that activated when we made physical contact?" "That was my first thought too," Elena replied, "but the power requirements for generating this kind of signal would be enormous. Our sensors detect no active power source aboard the derelict. No fusion reactors, no antimatter containment, no energy storage systems of any kind that we can identify." Jake pulled up another data set, this one showing the strange gravitational anomalies they had detected during their initial approach. "But something is definitely affecting local space-time around that ship. The gravitational distortion has actually increased since we began towing operations. It's as if our presence is somehow energizing whatever's in there." "That's impossible," Maria said. But even as she spoke the words, she knew they were inadequate. In 30 years of deep space travel, she had learned that the universe had a way of making the impossible merely improbable. Elena's tablet chimed with an incoming message alert. She glanced at the notification, and her expression shifted from scientific curiosity to genuine concern. "Captain, we have a problem. I've been running pattern analysis on the electromagnetic emissions, trying to determine if they might represent some form of communication. And the computer has found structural similarities to known xenolinguistic frameworks. The patterns are too complex to be random, but they're also too organized to be natural phenomena. If I had to make a professional assessment, I would say that something inside that ship is trying to communicate with us. The silence that followed her words was broken only by the subtle hum of the Persistence's life support systems and the occasional creak of stressed metal from the tractor beam assembly. Finally, Jake spoke what all three of them were thinking. If there's a living being aboard that derelict, we have a legal and moral obligation to attempt a rescue. Galactic maritime law was clear on this point. The preservation of life took precedence over salvage rights, profit margins, and personal safety. But the law had been written with conventional rescue scenarios in mind, not situations involving potentially alien consciousness and technology that defied current scientific understanding. Elena, what would it take to establish meaningful communication? Assuming, for the sake of argument, that there actually is someone or something in there trying to talk to us? Elena considered the question carefully. The basic approach would be to respond with increasingly complex mathematical sequences, prime numbers, geometric progressions, that kind of thing. If we get responses that indicate understanding, we can try to build a more sophisticated vocabulary from there. How long would that process take? With a cooperative subject and optimal conditions, maybe several days, to establish basic concepts. With an unknown alien intelligence that might not even think in ways we can comprehend, could be weeks or months, or never. Maria felt the weight of command pressing down on her shoulders like a physical force. Every minute they spent trying to communicate with their mysterious passenger was another minute of fuel consumption, another step away from the safety of Kepler Station. But if there was even a chance that a living being was trapped aboard that derelict vessel, she couldn't simply ignore it. Jake, what's our current fuel status? 57% of capacity remaining. At our current consumption rate, we can reach Kepler Station with about 8% in reserve. That's cutting it close, but manageable if we don't encounter any problems. And if we want to maintain position here while Elena attempts communication, Jake consulted his calculations. We could hold position for maybe 12 hours before we'd be committed to using emergency reserves. Any longer than that, and we'd be gambling with all our lives. Alina was already pulling up communication protocols on her tablet. Captain, I can set up a basic mathematical exchange in about 30 minutes. If there's going to be a response, we should see some indication within the first few hours. Maria made her decision with the kind of quick certainty that had kept her alive through 2 decades of dangerous salvage operations. Do it. We'll give this 12 hours. If we haven't established meaningful contact by then, we continue to Kepler Station and let the authorities sort it out. The next few hours passed with agonizing slowness. Elena had rigged a communication array that could transmit mathematical sequences toward the derelict using a variety of electromagnetic frequencies. She started simple, pulses representing the first 10 prime numbers, and waited for a response. For the first hour, nothing happened. The alien ship continued to emit its strange rhythmic patterns, but there was no indication that these were related to Elena's transmissions. Jake monitored the gravitational anomalies and reported that they seemed to be slowly intensifying, though he couldn't explain why. Then, at the 93-minute mark, something changed. "Captain," Elena called out, her voice tight with excitement and fear, "we're getting a response." The pattern that appeared on the communication display was unmistakably deliberate. The unknown intelligence had not only recognized Elena's prime number sequence, it had responded with the next 10 primes in the series, numbers that Elena had not yet transmitted. "It's learning faster than any natural intelligence should be able to," Elena reported. "I've moved on to geometric sequences, and it's not just responding. It's predicting where I'm going with the patterns and jumping ahead." Jake's sensor readings were becoming increasingly active as well. "The gravitational distortions are intensifying rapidly now, and Captain, I'm detecting something else. Trace amounts of exotic particles that weren't there before. It's as if the communication process is somehow powering up systems inside the derelict." Maria floated over to Elena's station and studied the communication logs. The mathematical exchanges were becoming more complex by the minute. evolving from simple number sequences to geometric relationships to what appeared to be basic physical constants. The alien intelligence was not just responding to Elena's inputs. It was teaching, sharing information at a rate that suggested either incredible intelligence or some form of technological augmentation. Whether it needs help, I can try. Elena composed a new sequence based on mathematical representations of basic physical states, energy levels, structural integrity, life support requirements. She transmitted the query and waited. The response came back almost immediately, and what they saw made all three of them stare in amazement. The alien intelligence had not only understood the question, it had responded with a detailed mathematical model that appeared to represent the internal structure of the derelict ship itself. "It's showing us a schematic," Elena breathed. "Look at this. These formations represent the crystalline structures I observed during the EVA. And these patterns here, I think it's showing us where it is. Where its consciousness is located. Jake's instruments were registering new phenomena every few minutes now. Captain, whatever we've awakened in there is drawing power from somewhere. I'm detecting active energy flows throughout the derelict's internal structure, and the gravitational field is approaching levels that might interfere with our tractor beam operation." Maria made a quick decision. "Elena, ask it if it's in danger. If continuing this communication process is putting it at risk." The mathematical query Elena transmitted was complex, incorporating concepts of structural failure, energy depletion, and time constraints. The response came back faster than any of the previous ones, and its urgency was unmistakable even in pure mathematical form. Elena's face went pale as she interpreted the alien intelligence's reply. "Captain, I think we've made a serious mistake. According to these calculations, the communication process is indeed drawing power from the ship's remaining systems, but it's not in danger, we are." "Explain. The energy it's using to communicate with us is coming from the same source that's maintaining the structural integrity of the crystalline formations. If those formations collapse, the gravitational anomaly they're apparently containing will be released." Jake was frantically working at his console, trying to get more detailed readings on the gravitational distortions. "Captain, if Elena's right, we could be looking at a cascade failure that would tear both ships apart. The math says we have maybe 6 hours before the containment reaches critical instability." Maria felt the familiar cold certainty that came with genuine emergency situations. "Elena, can you ask it to stop, to reduce the communication intensity?" But before Elena could compose the query, the alien intelligence transmitted a new message, one that was unlike anything they had received before. Instead of mathematical patterns, their screens filled with what appeared to be star charts, navigation data, and technical schematics of incredible complexity. "It's not stopping," Elena reported, her voice tight with strain. "If anything, it's increasing the transmission rate." "Captain, I think it's trying to download something into our computers, some kind of data package." Jake's readings were becoming increasingly urgent. "Whatever it's doing, it's accelerating the power drain. We've got maybe 4 hours now, and that's assuming the containment failure is gradual rather than catastrophic." Maria looked at the alien star charts filling her screens and realized that they were facing a choice that would define not just their own survival, but potentially the future of human space exploration. The intelligence aboard the derelict was offering them knowledge that could advance human civilization by centuries, but accepting that knowledge might cost them their lives. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she had the growing suspicion that this choice was exactly what the alien intelligence had been waiting for someone to make. The data flood continued for another 17 minutes before stopping as abruptly as it had begun. In that brief span, the Persistence's computer systems had absorbed more information than their storage banks were designed to handle, forcing Jake to reroute power from non-essential systems just to keep the core processors from overloading. Captain Maria Santos floated in the sudden silence, watching status lights flicker across her bridge displays like a constellation of warnings. The alien intelligence had gone quiet, but the damage was done. Their computers were struggling to process the massive data download, and Jake's gravitational readings suggested they had perhaps 3 hours before the containment systems aboard the derelict reached critical failure. "Elena, please tell me you can make sense of what we just received," Maria said, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer wouldn't be simple. "Dr." Elena Vasquez was hunched over her workstation, her fingers dancing across multiple interfaces as she tried to sort through the alien data package. "It's going to take days to properly analyze all of this, Captain. Maybe weeks. But I can already see that we're looking at star charts covering regions of space that are completely unmapped by human exploration. Technical specifications for technology that shouldn't be possible. And something else." She paused, her expression troubled as she studied a particular data stream. "What is it?" Maria prompted. "Historical records. I think the intelligence aboard that ship has been sending us the story of what happened to its civilization. Captain, if these records are accurate, we're not just looking at advanced technology. We're looking at the remnants of a galactic empire that existed millions of years before humans ever left Earth." Jake looked up from his console, where he had been monitoring the increasingly unstable gravitational readings from the derelict. "Captain, with respect to whatever historical significance this might have, we need to make a decision about our immediate situation. The power drain is accelerating, and I'm detecting microfractures in the alien ship's hull structure. When those crystalline formations fail, the gravitational shockwave is going to rip us apart." Maria studied the tactical display, weighing their limited options. They could cut the tractor beam and run, abandoning their salvage claim but potentially saving their lives. They could continue toward Kepler Station and hope the alien ship's containment held out for another day. Or they could attempt something that no human crew had ever tried before. "Elena, in all that data we just received, is there anything about the ship's internal systems, anything that might tell us how to stabilize the containment?" Elena's fingers flew across her interface, searching through the massive data files. "There's a lot of technical information here, but it's written in mathematical languages that are going to take time to decode." However, she paused, highlighting a section of the data stream. "There are schematic diagrams that might represent the ship's power distribution network. If I'm reading this correctly, the crystalline formations aren't just containing a gravitational anomaly. They're part of a controlled artificial singularity that powers the entire vessel." A controlled singularity? Jake's voice carried a mixture of awe and terror. "That would explain the gravitational readings." "But Captain, if that containment fails while we're attached to the derelict, we become part of the singularity," Maria finished grimly, "along with several billion tons of asteroid debris. Elena, is there any indication in those schematics of how the singularity is normally controlled? The mathematics are incredibly complex, but there appear to be external control interfaces distributed throughout the ship's structure. The problem is that most of those interfaces are in sections that were destroyed during whatever battle damaged the vessel." Maria made her decision with the kind of desperate clarity that came from having no good alternatives. "We're going aboard." Both Jake and Elena started to protest simultaneously, but Maria cut them off with a gesture. "Look at our situation objectively," she continued. "We can't outrun a gravitational collapse at our current distance. We can't stabilize the containment from here because we don't have the right equipment or understanding. And we can't abandon potentially the greatest archaeological discovery in human history without at least trying to preserve it." Elena was already pulling up the EVA protocols on her tablet. "The breaches in the hull should give us access to the interior spaces, but, Captain, we'll be working in zero gravity in a ship that could collapse into a singularity at any moment, trying to operate alien technology that we barely understand. Jake, can you maintain position here and monitor the situation? We'll need constant updates on the containment stability." "I can do that. But, Captain, if the readings go critical, I'm cutting the tractor beam and getting us clear, whether you're back aboard or not." "Understood." "That's an order, actually. The Persistence and her crew are more important than any salvage operation." As Maria and Elena suited up for what might be the most dangerous EVA of their careers, Jake continued his analysis of the alien data package. What he found in the mathematical records made him realize that their situation was even more complex than they had understood. "Captain," he called over the comm system as the two women prepared to cycle through the airlock. "I think I found something important in the historical data, the intelligence we've been communicating with. It's not the ship's original crew." Maria paused in her equipment check. "Explain." "According to these records, the vessel was originally operated by a species called the Vorthak, but they all died during the battle that damaged the ship. The intelligence we've been talking to is something else entirely, some kind of artificial consciousness that was created to preserve their knowledge and protect their technology." Elena's voice crackled through the comm system. "An AI guardian? That would explain the rapid learning curve and the ability to communicate in pure mathematical concepts." "It gets more interesting," Jake continued. "The historical records suggest that this guardian intelligence has been drifting through space for over 2 million years, waiting for someone to find the ship, and apparently, we're not the first." Maria felt a chill that had nothing to do with the environmental suit's cooling systems. What happened to the others? The records aren't clear, but it appears that several other species have encountered this derelict over the millennia. Some tried to salvage it for technology. Others tried to destroy it as a hazard to navigation. But in every case, the encounters ended badly. Either the salvage crews died in containment failures, or they were deemed unworthy by the Guardian and eliminated. Elena's voice carried a note of scientific fascination, despite the ominous implications. "So we're being tested." The communication exchange, the data download, even the containment crisis. It's all designed to evaluate whether we're suitable to receive whatever knowledge the Vorthak wanted preserved. "And Captain, based on the mathematical progressions in the communication logs, I think the test is still ongoing." Maria activated the airlock cycling sequence, committing herself and Elena to the most dangerous phase of their investigation. "Then we better make sure we pass." The journey from the Persistence to the derelict took 12 minutes, with both women using maneuvering packs to cross the gap between the ships. Up close, the alien vessel was even more imposing than it had appeared on their screens. The hull breaches that Elena had identified during her earlier EVA were large enough to fly a shuttle through, and the damage patterns told a story of a battle so fierce that it defied imagination. "Look at the weapon scarring," Elena observed as they approached the largest breach. "These aren't energy weapons or kinetic projectiles. The metal has been twisted at a molecular level, as if space itself was weaponized against this ship." They entered the derelict through what had once been a cargo bay, their suit lights cutting through absolute darkness to reveal interior spaces that seemed to extend forever in all directions. The crystalline formations that Elena had observed from outside were even more spectacular from within. Towering structures that grew from the deck and bulkheads like frozen lightning, creating fractal patterns that hurt to look at directly. "The artificial gravity is still functioning in some sections," Maria noted as she felt her suit's magnetic boots engage with the deck plating. "But it's inconsistent. We'll need to be careful about orientation changes." Elena was taking readings with her portable scanners, documenting everything they encountered. "The power flow through these crystalline structures is incredible. Each formation appears to be both a computer processor and a power conduit, all integrated into a single system. This is technology that's centuries beyond anything in our databases." As they moved deeper into the ship, following Elena's interpretation of the schematics they had received, they began to encounter spaces that defied conventional starship architecture. Chambers that were kilometers wide, with no visible means of structural support. Corridors that seemed to curve through dimensions that human mathematics couldn't adequately describe. And everywhere the crystalline formations grew in patterns that suggested not just intelligence but artistry on a scale that encompassed entire civilizations. "Captain," Jake's voice crackled through their comm system, distorted by the alien ship's exotic materials. "The containment readings are getting worse. You've got maybe 90 minutes before critical failure." Maria consulted the schematics on her suit's display system. "We're close to what appears to be the central control chamber. If we're going to find a way to stabilize the containment, it'll be there. The control chamber, when they finally reached it, was unlike anything either woman had ever seen. The space was vast, easily 100 meters in diameter, and filled with crystalline formations so complex and beautiful that they seemed more like sculptures than technology. At the center of the chamber, suspended in a web of energy that made the air itself glow, was a structure that could only be described as a throne. And sitting on that throne, composed entirely of crystalline formations that pulsed with inner light, was something that had once been alive. "My God," Elena whispered, "it's not an artificial intelligence. It's the uploaded consciousness of one of the original crew members." The crystalline figure stirred as they approached, and suddenly the chamber filled with a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. But instead of the alien language they might have expected, it spoke in perfect, unaccented English. "Welcome, humans of Earth," the voice said, and Maria realized that their test was just beginning. The voice that filled the crystalline chamber carried the weight of eons, each word resonating through the exotic matter structures with harmonics that seemed to reach directly into their minds. Captain Maria Santos and Dr. Elena Vasquez stood frozen in their environmental suits, staring at the figure on the throne, a being that had transcended death itself to become something between flesh and technology. "You are surprised by my language," the entity observed, and Maria could see patterns of light shifting through the crystalline formations that comprised its form. "Your species broadcasts its communications across the electromagnetic spectrum with little regard for who might be listening. I have had considerable time to learn." Alina found her voice first, her scientific training helping her process the impossible situation they found themselves in. "You're Vorthak, one of the original crew of this vessel." "I am Kethvar, last guardian of the singing deep," the entity replied. The crystalline formations around the chamber pulsed in rhythm with its words, creating light patterns that seemed to convey meaning beyond the spoken language. "I was the ship's navigator before the final battle, and I chose this existence to preserve what must not be lost." Maria's practical mind cut through her awe to focus on their immediate situation. "Guardian Kethvar, our sensors indicate that your ship's containment systems are failing. We came here to try to help, but we need to understand what we're dealing with." The alien consciousness regarded her with what might have been amusement, though reading expressions in a being made of living crystal was beyond human experience. "Your concern is admirable, but you misunderstand the nature of your situation. The containment is not failing. It is being deliberately destabilized." Alina's scanner readings suddenly made terrible sense. "You're doing this intentionally. The communication process, the power drain, the gravitational instabilities, it's all under your control." "Indeed," Kethvar confirmed. "For 2 million years, I have waited for a species worthy of the burden I carry. Many have found this vessel. The Altarians sought to salvage our technology for weapons. The Vegans tried to destroy what they could not understand. The Crystalline Collective attempted to absorb our knowledge without comprehending its cost. All were found wanting." Jake's voice crackled through their comm system, barely audible through the interference generated by the chamber's exotic energies. "Captain, the gravitational readings are off the charts now. Whatever's happening in there, you need to resolve it in the next 30 minutes or we're all going to become part of a very small black hole." Maria looked up at the towering crystalline figure, realizing that they were facing a test that went far beyond technical competence or archaeological ethics. "What do you want from us? What would make us worthy in your eyes?" The Guardian's form shifted, the crystalline structures rearranging themselves into new configurations as it considered her question. Around the chamber, the exotic matter formations began to display images. Scenes from across the galaxy that told the story of the Vorthak civilization. 2.5 million years ago, my people achieved what your species calls a technological singularity, Kethvar began. We mastered the fundamental forces of the universe, created artificial worlds, transcended the limitations of biological existence. We believed ourselves to be gods. The images showed star systems transformed into vast engineering projects, artificial worlds that dwarfed planets, and creatures of such beauty and power that they seemed like living myths. It was a civilization at the absolute peak of what intelligent life could achieve. But with godhood came responsibility we were not prepared to accept, the Guardian continued. We encountered the others, beings from another reality whose nature was antithetical to our own. They sought to remake this universe according to their alien mathematics, to transform matter and energy into patterns that could only be described as evil. The images changed, showing scenes of cosmic war on a scale that made galactic conflicts seem like minor skirmishes. Entire star systems were consumed as battlegrounds, and the very fabric of space-time was twisted into weapons of unimaginable power. Elena was recording everything, her scientific mind reeling at the implications of what they were witnessing. The weapon scarring on your ship? It's from this war? The final battle, Kethvar confirmed. We thought we had won. The others were driven back to their own reality. Their access points to our universe were sealed. But the cost of victory was the destruction of my civilization. Only a few ships survived, and we were tasked with preserving the knowledge that would be needed if the others ever returned. Maria felt the weight of cosmic responsibility settling on her shoulders like a physical presence. And you believe they will return? I know they will, the Guardian replied, and the certainty in its voice was absolute. The seals weaken with time. Already there are signs that their influence is beginning to seep back into this reality. Your species has encountered them, though you do not recognize them for what they are. The implications hit Elena like a physical blow. The unexplained phenomena that deep space explorers have been reporting, ships found drifting with their crews driven insane. Star systems where the physical laws seem to operate differently. We've been attributing it to unknown alien technologies or natural anomalies. But B, it is the beginning of their return, Kethvar finished. And when they come in force, this galaxy will need defenders who understand the true nature of the threat. That knowledge is why I have endured for 2 million years. It is why this ship continues to exist despite its apparent destruction. Jake's increasingly frantic voice cut through the chamber's resonance. Captain, we've got maybe 15 minutes before the singularity goes critical. I'm reading massive gravitational waves propagating through local space. If you're going to do something, it has to be now. Maria stared at the Guardian, understanding finally dawning on her. This isn't really a test of our technological capabilities, is it? You're trying to determine if humanity is ready to take on the responsibility of fighting this war. Your species intrigues me, Kethvar admitted. You are young, barely emerged from your homeworld, with technology that is primitive compared to what my people achieved. But you have something that we lost in our ascension to godhood, the ability to hope in the face of impossible odds, the willingness to risk everything for the chance to preserve life. Elena was studying her scanner readings, trying to understand the true nature of what was happening around them. The containment failure, it's not really a failure, is it? You're offering us a choice. Accept the responsibility of guarding against the other's return, or allow the singularity to collapse and eliminate the knowledge along with anyone who might misuse it. Precisely, the Guardian confirmed. If you choose to accept the burden I have carried for so long, I will transfer to your ship's computers everything my people learned about the others and the weapons needed to fight them. And your civilization will be given the tools it needs to prepare for the war that is coming. But if you prove unworthy, if you seek only to exploit this knowledge for personal gain or factional advantage, then I will allow the containment to fail, and the secret will die with all of us. Maria looked at Elena, seeing her own understanding reflected in the archaeologist's eyes. They weren't just being offered advanced technology or historical artifacts. They were being asked to become the guardians of an entire galaxy, to carry the burden of defending against a threat that most intelligent species couldn't even comprehend. How long do we have to decide? Maria asked. The choice has already been made, Cathvar replied, and Maria realized that the Guardian had been reading their responses throughout the entire encounter. Your actions since discovering this vessel have demonstrated the qualities my people lacked. You risked your lives to attempt communication with an unknown intelligence. You came aboard a failing ship to try to help what you believed was a trapped survivor. And now, faced with knowledge that could make your species the dominant power in the galaxy, your first concern is whether you are worthy to receive it, Teddy. The crystalline formations around the chamber began to pulse with increasing intensity, and Maria felt a strange sensation in her mind, as if vast amounts of information were being gently inserted into her consciousness. But unlike the overwhelming data flood they had experienced earlier, this transfer felt natural, even comforting. I am giving you the basic knowledge your species will need to begin preparing for what is to come, Cathvar explained. The complete archives of Vorthak science and history, the location of hidden weapons caches throughout this galaxy, and most importantly, the ability to recognize the others when they begin to manifest in your reality. This is incredible. The mathematical principles alone could advance human science by millennia. But Guardian, why us? Why not wait for a more advanced civilization? Because advancement does not equal worthiness, the Guardian replied. My people were advanced beyond your comprehension, but we were not prepared for the responsibility that came with that advancement. Humanity is still young enough to learn, still humble enough to accept guidance, and still desperate enough to fight with everything you have when the time comes. Jake's voice cut through the chamber one final time, though now it carried a note of wonder rather than panic. Captain, the gravitational readings are stabilizing. Whatever's happening in there, the singularity is coming under control. Maria felt the weight of cosmic responsibility settling into her mind alongside the vast repository of alien knowledge. She understood now that their simple salvage operation had become something infinitely more significant, the passing of a torch that had burned for millions of years, waiting for hands worthy to carry it forward. What happens to you now? She asked the Guardian. Cathvar's crystalline form began to fade, the energy patterns that sustained its consciousness flowing outward into the ship's superstructure. My vigil is ended. The knowledge is preserved, and it rests now in hands that will not let it be corrupted or forgotten. I go to join my people in whatever lies beyond death, content that the galaxy will have protectors. As the Guardian's presence faded from the chamber, Maria and Elena found themselves alone among the crystalline formations that continued to pulse with inner light. But they were no longer the same people who had entered the chamber. They carried within their minds the accumulated wisdom of an entire civilization and the terrible knowledge of what was coming. The war for the galaxy's survival was still generations away, but preparation had to begin now, and somehow, impossibly, that preparation would begin with 3 humans in a salvage vessel, armed with nothing but determination and the legacy of a species that had already paid the ultimate price for victory. 6 months after the encounter with the Guardian Cathvar, the salvage vessel Persistence sat in a classified dock at Luna Station, undergoing modifications that would have seemed impossible before their discovery of the Vorthak derelict. Captain Maria Santos stood in the observation lounge, watching technicians install systems that incorporated principles of exotic matter manipulation and dimensional engineering, technologies that human science was only beginning to understand. The official story was that they had discovered a derelict containing a functional but alien computer system that had yielded significant technological advances. The truth that they now carried the accumulated knowledge of a galactic civilization and the responsibility for preparing humanity for a cosmic war remained classified at the highest levels of both Earth government and the Galactic Council. Dr. Elena Vasquez entered the lounge carrying a data tablet and wearing the expression of someone who had been wrestling with impossible mathematics for weeks. The translation of the weapon cache coordinates is finally complete, she announced, settling into a chair beside Maria. We've identified 47 hidden installations scattered throughout this spiral arm of the galaxy. Most of them are in systems that haven't been explored by any known civilization. Maria nodded. though her attention remained focused on the modifications being made to their ship. The Persistence was being transformed from a simple salvage vessel into something that could serve as humanity's first line of defense against threats that most people couldn't even imagine. Any word from Jake on the Deep Space Reconnaissance mission? He checked in yesterday. The survey of the Arcturus Nebula is proceeding according to schedule, but he's found traces of the dimensional distortions that Kethvar warned us about. The others are definitely beginning to probe this reality again. The knowledge that the Guardian had transferred to them had come with a terrible clarity about the nature of the threat facing the galaxy. The others weren't simply an alien species with advanced technology. They were entities from a reality where the fundamental laws of physics operated according to principles that were actively hostile to life as it existed in this universe. Their very presence twisted space-time in ways that drove most intelligent beings insane, and their ultimate goal was to remake this reality according to their own alien mathematics. Elena consulted her tablet, pulling up star charts that showed the current deployment of human exploration and defense assets. The good news is that the technology we've shared with Earth government is being implemented faster than anyone expected. The new FTL drive systems based on Vorthak principles are already in prototype testing, and the Weapons Research Division has made breakthrough progress in exotic matter manipulation. And the bad news? The bad news is that we're still talking about decades before humanity will have the infrastructure to mount an effective defense against what's coming. And that assumes we can convince the other galactic civilizations to cooperate when the time comes. Maria turned away from the observation window, her mind heavy with the weight of knowledge she hadn't asked for but couldn't ignore. The Altarians and vegans are still skeptical about our claims regarding the dimensional threat. They think we're using scare tactics to justify human expansion into sectors they consider their territory. The fact that we can't provide direct proof of the other's existence without revealing technologies we're not ready to share makes the diplomatic situation complicated. The irony wasn't lost on Maria. The same advanced knowledge that made it possible to defend against the others also made it impossible to convince potential allies of the threat without revealing capabilities that would fundamentally alter the balance of power in the galaxy. It was a problem that Kethvar's people had apparently faced as well, judging from the historical records they had inherited. "Have you made any progress on understanding why the Guardian chose us specifically?" Maria asked. "I keep thinking there had to be other species, other individuals, who might have been equally worthy of receiving this responsibility." Elena was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of conclusions she had been reluctant to reach. "I think it was precisely because we weren't the obvious choice. Every other species that encountered the derelict was either too advanced or too primitive. The Altarians were technologically sophisticated but politically fractured. The vegans were unified but lacked the psychological flexibility to adapt to new paradigms. The crystalline collective was powerful but fundamentally selfish. And humans? Humans are just advanced enough to understand the technology, just unified enough to implement it effectively, and just desperate enough to actually use it when the time comes. We're also young enough as a spacefaring civilization to still believe that impossible odds can be overcome through determination and sacrifice." Maria considered this assessment, thinking about the chain of coincidences that had led to their discovery of the Vorthak ship, a salvage crew operating on the margins of civilized space, following up on a derelict that every other organization had dismissed as worthless. If they had been more successful, more prosperous, they might never have taken on such a marginal job. If they had been less experienced, they might not have survived the encounter with the Guardian's tests. "Jake's preliminary reports from the deep space missions are troubling," Elena continued. "He's found evidence of others' influence in 17 star systems so far, ships found drifting with their crews dead or insane, planets where the physics don't quite work the way they should, and in 3 cases, entire stellar phenomena that shouldn't be able to exist according to our understanding of cosmology." Maria felt the familiar chill that came with contemplating the scope of what they were up against. "How long do you think we have before the situation becomes critical?" Based on the progression patterns in Kethvar's historical records, I estimate between 50 and 75 years before the others achieve sufficient dimensional stability to begin their main assault. That gives us time to prepare, but not much margin for error. The conversation was interrupted by an incoming communication alert. Maria activated the lounge's communication system, and Jake Morrison's image appeared on the main display screen. He looked tired and strained, the kind of exhaustion that came from staring into cosmic mysteries that human minds weren't designed to comprehend. "Captain, I'm transmitting my full report now, but I wanted to give you the highlights personally. The situation is worse than we thought." Define worse, Jake. The dimensional incursions aren't random. There's a pattern to them, a strategic intelligence behind the placement and timing. The others aren't just probing our reality, they're mapping it, identifying key strategic points for some kind of coordinated assault. Elena leaned forward in her chair. "Are you saying they're already planning their invasion?" "I'm saying they've been planning it for a long time, probably since their last defeat 2 million years ago. Every probe, every dimensional distortion, every impossible stellar phenomenon is part of a reconnaissance operation on a galactic scale. They know exactly what they're doing." Maria felt the weight of cosmic responsibility pressing down on her shoulders like a physical force. The knowledge that Kethvar had transferred to them suddenly seemed inadequate for the scale of the threat they were facing. "Jake, are you detecting any immediate dangers? Anything that requires immediate action?" "Not immediate, but close. I found what appears to be a staging area in the Proxima Centauri system, about 3 light-years from Earth. It's not active yet, but the dimensional distortions are increasing exponentially. If current trends continue, that location could become a full breach point within the next 5 to 10 years. Elena was already pulling up star charts on her tablet, cross-referencing Jake's findings with the weapon cache locations they had inherited from the Guardian. "There's a Vorthak weapons depot in the Alpha Centauri system. If we can access those resources and establish a defensive perimeter around the Proxima staging area, we might be able to prevent or delay a full-scale incursion," Maria finished. "But that would mean revealing our capabilities to Earth government and probably to the Galactic Council as well." The three of them fell silent, contemplating the implications of what they were discussing. Every decision they made seemed to lead to larger responsibilities, greater risks, and more complex political situations. The simple salvage operation that had started their involvement had become a commitment to defending the entire galaxy. "There's something else," Jake continued, his image flickering slightly due to the exotic matter interference from his current location. "I think I found evidence of other Vorthak Guardians." Maria and Elena stared at the screen in amazement. "Other ships like the one we discovered?" "Not ships, but installations. Hidden bases in star systems that were apparently selected for their strategic value. Most of them appear to be dormant, but I'm detecting the same kind of exotic matter signatures that we found aboard Kethvar's vessel." Elena's scientific mind immediately began calculating possibilities. If there are other Guardians, other repositories of Vorthak knowledge, we might not be carrying this burden alone. There could be additional resources, technologies we haven't discovered yet, maybe even tactical information about the other's weaknesses. But Maria was thinking about the implications from a different angle. Or there could be other tests, other challenges that we'll need to prove ourselves worthy of surviving. Kethvar chose us, but that doesn't mean the other Guardians will make the same choice. Jake's expression grew more serious. "Captain, there's one more thing. In the last system I surveyed, I found evidence of recent visitation. Someone else has been investigating the same dimensional anomalies we're tracking. Ship signatures that don't match any known civilization in our databases. Other species that have discovered the truth about the others? That's one possibility. The other is that the others themselves have agents working in this reality, beings that can pass for normal life forms while serving their master's agenda. The implications of this revelation hit all three of them simultaneously. If the others had already infiltrated normal galactic civilization, then the threat was far more immediate than they had realized. Every diplomatic contact, every technological exchange, every political negotiation could potentially be compromised by entities whose ultimate goal was the complete transformation of reality itself. Maria made her decision with the kind of desperate clarity that had defined her entire career in deep space salvage. Jake, complete your current survey mission and return to Luna Station immediately. Elena, I want full translations of the Guardian's strategic archives, with particular focus on identifying others' agents and defensive countermeasures. And both of you need to prepare for the possibility that our timeline just collapsed from decades to years. As Jake's image faded from the communication screen, Maria returned to the observation window, watching the technicians complete their installation of exotic matter manipulation systems aboard the Persistence. The ship that had started as a simple salvage vessel was becoming humanity's first Guardian-class defender, equipped with technologies that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. But as she watched the work proceeding, Maria realized that the most important transformation hadn't happened to their ship. It had happened to them. 3 humans who had started as independent salvagers had become the keepers of cosmic secrets, the inheritors of a responsibility that spanned millions of years, and possibly the galaxy's last hope against a threat that most intelligent beings couldn't even comprehend. The war for the survival of reality itself was still years away, but the battle to prepare for it had already begun. And somehow, impossibly, the fate of countless civilizations now rested in the hands of 3 humans who had simply been in the right place at the right time to hear the final words of a Guardian who had waited 2 million years to pass on the torch. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of irony that transcended species boundaries. But as Maria Santos had learned over 3 decades of making impossible things happen through determination and ingenuity, sometimes the most unlikely heroes were exactly what impossible situations required. In the distance, Earth turned slowly in its orbit, its billions of inhabitants unaware that their future had just been secured by 3 people who had started the day thinking they were simply hauling scrap metal. But that, Maria reflected, was probably exactly how it should be. The best heroes, after all, were the ones who never intended to become heroes at all. They were just people who refused to walk away when walking away was the sensible thing to do. Humans pick up a dilapidated ship, uncovering a conscious asteroid mine. HFY Sci-Fi Story.